And so now moving on to chapter 9. Now we are moving from part 1 of the becoming me to the becoming us space. And it is already, she's coming out of the gate swinging. And I was like, whoa. So again, we kind of slow down. It's not too much of like a great transition like we talked about before. She's kind of slowing down and giving us a lot more in terms of details as she is now parking in her adulthood, over 25, at the law firm, trying to figure out life. Now she has this man. We enter into chapter 9 coming off of the ice cream kiss moment, right? And after that moment, she basically says like they wasted no time. She spent most of her time in his apartment with him, and he's intriguing her. Like, she didn't feel comfortable with him coming and staying over at her apartment, knowing that her parents were downstairs, even though it had a separate entrance. She just didn't feel comfortable with that. So she was like, no, I'll come to your place. And she spent the night with him a lot of times. And she said that, in those moments of just like the private moments that they had, how he intrigued her. She talks about how she's like watching him and he's in deep thought. And she's like, hey, what's going on? And he's talking about, I'm thinking about the income inequality of America. What? Like, she has rolled over from a, can you imagine rolling over from a nap? The man that you're dating is in deep thought, and you're like, hey babe, what you thinking about? Oh, I'm just sitting here thinking about the income inequality here in our country. What? And I think it was in those moments, those small moments, where she was like, I got somebody different. Like, he's not like your typical gentleman here. And so she talks about how like he showed some very different kind of thoughts, even as it pertains to like them, their involvement, getting married, thoughts of that nature, meeting her family. And so she highlights it, and she actually, talks about it on page 114, where she says that Barack has spent a lot of time in churches during his time as a community organizer, which had left him with an appreciation for organized religion. Sorry, guys, I'm actually reading my book sideways. So let me actually upright it and then my head will go upright. Okay. So, but at the same time, he remained less traditional. Marriage, he told me early on, struck him as an unnecessary and overhyped convention. Wow. That is something. And so then she talks about how her father appreciated Barack instantly, but still didn't like his odds. After all, he'd seen me jettison my high school boyfriend, David, at the gates of Princeton. He watched me dismiss Kevin, the college football player, as soon as I'd seen him in a furry mascot outfit. My parents knew better than to get too attached. They raised me to run my own life. And that's basically what I did. I was too focused and too busy. I told my parents plenty of time to make room for any man. According to Craig, my father shook his head, laughed as he watched me and Barack walk away, saying, nice guy, too bad he won't last. Honey, listen, Mr. Robinson said, this is a real nice guy. I think he could possibly be it for her, but she ain't gonna do right. When your dad, but see, also that goes to show you, when your people know you and when your people know you and they know you well, it's just like, okay, well, he's a sweet guy. I like him. I shook his hand. I think he'd be okay for me. He just ain't gonna last because Mish. What? Oh goodness. But I thought that was really cool and highlighting just like, again, the things that she's recited, the things that even kept her in her own way from, them dating when they decided to date. The thing that kept her that kept her from actually dating him was the fact that, I'm too busy, I don't have time. And she said this to her family, and to the point that her family also believes it. So when he is there, he's like, her dad is like, oh no, he ain't gonna last long, God bless him on his way. Wow. Okay. Anywho, so in this particular chapter, she also gives us a snapshot of Barack's family as she's getting to know him. She knows that his mom's name is Ann Dunham. He tells her about his dad, Barack Obama, and the shenanigans that they get into as young people who got married. And then she found out that he also had a family in Nairobi, like, child, the drama. Right. But then, his mom actually married his stepdad, Lolo Soetoro. And then, he spent some of his time in Indonesia with his mother. And then his mom is like, you know what, the school system here, I don't necessarily trust. I'm going to send him back home to my parents. So then he's grown up, or he's raised with his grandparents. And then there's also the space where he talks about his half-sister Maya from his mom and his half-sister Alma from his dad, that he knows these things. His mother is one who writes constantly. She's flying back constantly to see him. His dad, not so much. And, that's unfortunate. But in this space, one thing that she highlights is that she's very intrigued at how his family of origin was created and the things that he was able to overcome, and how his viewpoint was what it was, with his life being what it is, and how their lifestyles and their family styles were very different, but how it was also very intriguing for her of his care for others, knowing what he started to know. And she also talks about how, as she's introduced to him in this space of being a caring individual as a community organizer on pages 117 and 118, and how she's just like, you know what, I thought that I was, a thoughtful person, but I don't know if I'm on the level that he is on in terms of the thoughtfulness. Because she says, I've never seen someone who dwelled on the more demoralizing parts of being, the more demoralizing parts of being African American. I'd been raised to think positively. I'd absorbed my family's love and my parents' commitment to seeing us succeed. I'd stood with Santita Jackson at Operation Push rallies, listening to her father call for Black people to remember their pride. My purpose had always been to see my past neighborhood, to look ahead and overcome. And I'd scored myself 2 Ivy League degrees. I had a seat at the table at Sidley and Austin. I'd made my parents and grandparents proud. But listening to Barack at the community organizing meeting, I began to understand that his version of hope reached far beyond mine. It was one thing to get yourself out of a stuck place, I realized. It was another thing entirely to try and get the place itself unstuck. And that's where she talks about the differings of their views, outcomes, and things of that nature, especially as it pertained to him being a community organizer, because she didn't really realize what he did as a community organizer until he went with her to one of the events, coming closer to the close of his summer associate program. And speaking of after the summer is closing, they are now in a space, she and former President Barack Obama are now in a space where they realize they are in love. They are in love, not the love that she talked about with David, the high school boyfriend. She is in love, trying to think through long distance type of love. And honey, long distance is a different type of love. Let me just say that. Let me park there. Lean in, sis. Lean in. long distance is a different type of love. And it is not one that you should take lightly. When people say that most people do not last with long distance, honey, they are not lying. Ooh, because I tried it and it is so hard. It is so hard to sit here and say that you are going to be in love and gather yourself and things of that nature and try to make things work with a partner when you are miles away, when all you want to do is just like, you want to hang out, you want to do the things. And it's easier now with FaceTime, obviously. But again, your former first lady was out here saying that she was going to be involved in a long distance relationship in 1989. Internet was not even as robust as it is today yet. Like, we still got pixelated. We ain't even got the AOL. We don't even have that yet. And she's talking about she wants to be like, Wi-Fi is not even a thing, sis. And she's talking about, you know what I'm gonna do? Make it work with this man. To the point where they're trying to figure it out. And she's like, oh, okay, we're going to have to do the phone. And former President Barack Obama was like, I'm not really a phone kind of guy. And so she gave the background as to why he wasn't a phone kind of guy. And it made sense because and she talks about how he's more of a letter writer because how he communicated with his mother when his mother was in Indonesia, it was through letters. So there's a fondness to, hey, let's write letters. Oh, and that was so sweet. It was really, really sweet. But let me tell you something about your former first lady. If she's not anything, I done told you if she's anything, she's honest. She is brutally honest. And she told him, if I'm not talking to you on the phone, I might have to find another guy who will listen. And she was like, I was joking when I told him that, but only a little bit. Like, he hit her with let's be romantic. Let's write the letters. And she was like, child, listen, it better be a phone call. We better run up these long distance charges. That's another thing. They're doing long distance when the phone bill was really high and it had to be charged if you called out of town, and not even out of town, if the area code was different. See, listen, if the area code for you young ones that are out here watching the things, this is, so I don't know if they taught y'all about area codes, but you should know that there's a difference of area codes, but it doesn't necessarily matter all too much when you have a cell phone. But there was a thing called landline phones. And landline was connected into the wall in the house. So you could, it was like late 90s, early 2000s where people, like most households, could afford a phone that was not attached to a cord, where they could walk around the house with a phone that wasn't attached to a cord. And then like late 2000s, like 2006, 7, 8, 9 is when we start seeing the uptick in the cell phones, individual cell phones in the household, but you also had the landline. But in the space of the phones and things of that nature, cell phone or not, long distance at that time mattered, and you could get overage charges for long distance and running up a bill. Bet you didn't know that. Check your history. See, look at me. I'm out here helping the children, like Mrs. Michelle Obama, out here saving souls, helping the children to know their history. Do the research. Landlines, it was a thing. But okay, so moving on. So she tells him, she pretty much not necessarily gives him an ultimatum, but jokingly gives him an ultimatum of like, okay, I hear you with this letter shenanigans and things, but if I don't hear your voice on the phone, I may have to find me somebody else who's gonna do the things and who I can talk to on the phone. So in this space, so obviously he's calling her on the phone, as we know, because they're still married today. But obviously, we had to point that out. But she's now at work. She's now a part of the recruitment process. And she's in the space with another one of her mentors who happens to be a Black attorney. And they are in the space of trying to push for more diversity within the firm. And a lot of what they are dealing with is that, you know, the firm is like happy to just recruit from the Princetons, the Harvards, the universities of Chicago's, where the alma maters of like the partners are. They are okay with just recruiting from there and not anywhere else. And they are having to, she talks about how she's having to battle it out with these conversations of like, no, we need to interview this person to make sure that they actually fit, not cross them off the list because they don't match the alma maters of any of you all who went to the school before. Like, can you imagine in like the late 1980s where this is what she's having to fight for? In the 1990s, this is what she's having to fight for. She's having to fight for people to get a toe in the door off of the simple things of, oh, they attend Howard University. Oh, they attend Savannah State University. Oh, they attend, if there's a Chicago, Ohio State University. And they're like, nah, we don't want them because they attend Ohio State. And she's like, no, hey, everybody pause. We need to interview this person to see if they're actually qualified. Like, what? These are the battles that she's having. So anywho, but she talks about how because of the fight that she's fighting the good fight of faith of trying to get some diversity, because again, 400 attorneys there and only 5 of them are Black. So she's out here trying to fight the good fight of faith, and she's visiting in the space of doing her tours of recruitment. It takes her to Cambridge, where she goes to see Barack. She visits former President Barack Obama, and you know, she talks about how like when she realized what, you know, the type of lifestyle that he's living. He's very modest, you know, driving a yellow Datsun. It shakes and trembles. And she's like, what? And she also noticed that the floor is rusting through to where she can actually see the bottom, or she can actually see the road. And she was like, this is going to be an interesting adventure with this man. Like, that's what she's thinking to herself. But then Christmas comes around, and that Christmas they go to Honolulu. So she's going to Hawaii to meet the family and to see him in his familial element. And she finds out that he's a little bit more laid back in his familial element. And she also tends to embrace it while she's there. She's embracing the not rushing. She's embracing the not knowing. And she's getting to know his half-sister, Maya, Toot and Gramps, who are his grandparents that helped raise him, and his mom. And in meeting his family, she said that she felt that she understood the reason why she and former President Barack Obama fit together like a nice little puzzle piece. She felt like she got the answer there while sitting there with his family. The fact that they have differing backgrounds and experiences by way of, you know, it's her mom, her dad, Craig, and herself. And they're this, you know, firm, tight square. Whereas, you know, her husband or her boyfriend at that time has little bit more of a geometrical type of shape that's not as simple as the square, but it still makes sense for his family dynamic, and he's still been able to prosper and be fruitful from that dynamic. And so she starts to realize too in this space that they're having some very daring conversations in the space of them dating. Like they've professed love, but in the space of professing love, they're also talking about what house they would want to live in together. They're also talking about what type of parents they would want to be. And she talks about how these are very dangerous, like very she talks about how they were overwhelmingly dangerous conversations, because let's be clear, if you are having a conversation with someone who you don't necessarily know what the future holds with, it is scary to have that conversation. But she also talks about, in the space of that conversation, it gave her a bit more of a reassurance about where they were going and how he felt about where they were going, because he's also in the space of having these conversations with her. And he's talking about these things of what type of parent he would want to be, what kind of house he would want to live in. And he's talking about it with her, keeping her in on the loop. And I think that's the difference, because a lot of times we in the dating space, we try to, what's the word? We try to justify somebody who may not necessarily be willing to be with us because they haven't said that they want these things with you. They may actually want marriage. They may actually want children. They may actually want the white picket fence and the house. They just may not want it with you. And I think a lot of times when we are in these dating spaces, those are the things that we kind of want to uncover. Do you want kids? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Do you see yourself wanting kids with me? Is a further drill down question. And I think a lot of times we are intimidated by having those conversations because we may be afraid of the answer that may come as a result. But I can say this, having bold conversations and asking the bold questions could also save you the time so that you don't waste it with someone who is just thinking that, who's practicing relationships with you, which again, there's nothing wrong with practicing relationships. But if you are someone or somewhat in a space where you feel like I want something that's more serious as opposed to practicing a relationship, then you kind of want to know where your partner's head is as it pertains to what they are thinking, because what you don't want is to do all of the things and then find out, and you are prepping for life with him. You are prepping for kids with him. You are prepping for a house with him. And he's just prepping for a house and kids and a wife. It's just not you. Okay, got it. Good. All righty. So coming back from Hawaii, she has this conversation, and let me tell you something about former First Lady. She hits us with this just mollywop to the face and chest, where I wasn't even ready for what she was prepping us for. I was reading it, and then I got to the end of the chapter and I was like, oh, shoot. Oh, so girl, listen, if you didn't read the end of this chapter, that is your fault. Spoiler alert. We find out that, First Lady, former First Lady is, she talks about how she comes back from the trip. She's doing the things. Life is going on. She's still, and she highlights some of the friends that she's still in contact with. She's still in contact with Santita. She's still in contact with Verna Williams, Santita Jackson, Verna Williams, who's like a law school friend, Angela Kennedy, who was the additional roommate to Suzanne and herself when they were at Princeton. And then she gets to Suzanne. And at first, she starts this whole story off of like, kind of like how she did with the roommate situation when they first started to be roommates, and how Suzanne taught her essentially how to live with former President Barack Obama, and the fact that, they had the similarities of how they keep their clothes. But then she starts to evolve this story. She's talking about how Suzanne is having a time of her life. She's being a free spirit. She's dating these semi-famous pop stars. She's gallivanting across the world. And she talked about how she essentially judged her friend for it when it first happened. But then she hits us with such a reality check, and she was like, child, do you not know Suzanne, after coming back from this world tour, essentially being on tour, touring these countries with her mother, she gets the cancer. Not only does she get the cancer, her mom gets the cancer. And so Suzanne is in charge of trying to take care of her mom. And then they don't have a close knit family. So it's just she and her mom, and then her cousins are trying to also assist. Then you find out that Suzanne's mom passes away. And then, what's her name? Angela calls former first lady and was like, Mish, if you trying to see Suzanne, you better get on this plane and you better do it now. So she books the ticket, girl. And then she gets there. I think it's like Washington, D.C. or something like that. She books the ticket. She gets there and Suzanne is in a coma. I didn't see this going the way that it was. Like, I saw her setting it up, but I didn't see that it was going to be like a coma. And then she was like, and plus in the coma, we're sitting here, we're watching her, we're holding her hands, and her breath is taking her longer to take an inhale and exhale. And the nurse is looking at us like, child, I don't know, whatever you do. If you're Catholic, say your rosaries and say your prayers. However you talk to your Lord and Savior, this is the moment where you need to say your prayers over, because she's getting ready to head on into the great beyond. Whew. I was here. I mean, again, former First Lady Obama Molly whopped us with this reality. She was like, oh yeah, Suzanne went on to glory at 26. Oh, so obviously she had the messaging of, you need to live your life. You really do. Like, she talked about being a rule follower, checking the boxes and things like that. And she also talks about how she thought it wasn't fair that Suzanne was being buried at 26, that her life had ended at 26. But she also talks about how Suzanne did live a full life. Suzanne lived a life that was extremely vibrant. It was extremely full, that she was able to go and see things and do things that First Lady Obama actually talked about that she judged her for before she knew that the cancer was actually a thing. She judged her for it a little bit. But then after, knowing that her life was coming to an end, she talked about how she regretted not spending that time with her. But she also talked about how she is thankful that Suzanne didn't listen to her when she was out here giving this advice, and that Suzanne went and did the opposite of what she said. Because First Lady Obama talked about how she noticed that between the two of them, Suzanne was out here living life and she was out here checking boxes, even though this is not the life she wanted to live. Get that tea. So I think the biggest thing that we can take away from, and tie this up in a nice, pretty bow, the biggest thing that we can take away from chapter 9 is, the inner workings of this long distance relationship that she has now sought to progress in with former President Barack Obama, but also the tribute that she gave to her friend Suzanne, and living life and just taking time to smell the roses, to really embrace life for what it is, to take the trips, to have the adventures, to do the things, to go outside, look at a tree, to breathe the fresh air in, to be present in these moments, to make memories, and to do so vibrantly. I think that's what I've taken away from that chapter. And I mean, as sad as it is, and I'm like, this is how you leave chapter 9. But I think the heaviness of it really hit you to actually have to sit in it. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to end this. We're going to end this video in the heaviness of what she left it in. And we're going to pick up in our next post with chapters 10, 11, and 12. And we are now again in this space of becoming us. So she's no longer just Michelle Robinson. She is now Michelle Robinson, who got a man. Misha's got a man. Shout out to Shantae Moore, who is just, her vocals. Amazing. I just feel like she came in on the tail end of the Balladeers, kind of like how Tamar Braxton did, and they just really didn't know what to do with the Balladeers going into the late 90s, into the early 2000s, because music was being rocked in a different and completely, totally, like just a complete and totally different way. So, but anywho, stay focused. We are going over chapters 10, 11, and 12. And at that point, we will have gone through what, half of the book by that point? Because it's 24 chapters. So next week, we will have been through half of the book. So, pat yourself on the back. Because I think we were at nine out of 24. So somewhere around 1/3, over a little bit over 1/3, because 8 out of 24 would have been 1/3. So we are officially a little bit over 1/3 of the way through the book. Congratulations, pat yourself on the back. It is the thing to do around here, because again, we do not be out here reading the things if it's not a force of a thing for us to do. And I just need y'all to know that yes, I am going over some of these things, and these videos are like an hour long, but I'm only giving y'all snapshots. I'm only giving y'all meat. She gives thorough details. Your former first lady gives thorough details of what's going on in her life, all of the things that surrounds it, and she paints it in a beautiful picture to make you sit in that moment to really think and feel as if you are there. So when she's talking about Suzanne and how she's holding her hand, and Suzanne is sitting in that coma and they are watching her, it is very detailed to the point where you can see it in your imagination and you're like, oh no, like I was clearly, let me tell you something. I was close to the verge of tears. That's how good this book is. That's all I'm saying. So if you are only looking for me to give you the view, I'm only giving you high level review here. This is not into the weeds, nitty gritty. I only pull out a couple of quotes here and there, but the rest of the chapters, these chapters they are meaty. And I'm only giving you a few pieces of gristle here and there. So now that I've told you that, I thought that these chapters were absolutely great. I think that her telling us about the things of her Princeton life, and then we're getting into adulthood here at 25, and we kind of parked here between like 25 and 26. And I think she did a great job of highlighting some of the things that she's learned. The fact that, she's learned how to get out of her own way. She's learned and reflected on the fact that she probably wish she could have redone a couple of things in life at this point. She feels as though, like, the time that she spent working, that she probably could have spent a little bit more time with Suzanne prior to, as opposed to sending Verna as her liaison, because she said that too, and I was like, first lady. But also, people process grief in their own ways, and she probably wasn't ready yet, because again, she talks about how she feels that it is unfair that that Suzanne at age 26, she still looks like herself. She still looks young and vibrant, that she is taken out of this world and the world continues to go on and nobody knows or cares about Suzanne. And I just thought, oh, wow. So I think that she has done a really good job of giving us these snapshots of her life and carrying us through this journey with her as she is reflecting on these moments. And I have been thoroughly enjoying how she has been telling this story and unfolding this story. So again, in our next video, we are covering and tackling chapters 10, 11, and 12. Let me know in the comments some of the themes and the things that you thought, some of the themes and the things that you thought were really good in the chapter that you thought that I should have covered, but I didn't. Like, you let me know. I'll let you choose it. But again, like, do you think that, do you think that she stood in her own way for a little bit too long? Because again, by the time she realized that she was liking him, he only had a short amount of time, like a little bit, like almost a month before he had to go back to school. Do you think that, her trajectory of her life would have looked a whole lot different had she decided not to judge Kevin? I know, girl. These are questions for you. But anywho, I have thoroughly enjoyed our key for today. Again, like I said, in the next post, we'll be doing chapters 10, 11, and 12. I am so excited to come back and see what we have to talk about. Hopefully, this is we're gonna pause on burying people for a little while, because child, just in these 3 chapters, we have buried 3 people, and that is just whew, it's whew. But also Dandy and Grandma still alive. So I don't know, sis. I don't know. We may have to still, I don't know. I don't know. But again, going forward, chapters 10, 11, and 12, I look forward to going over those with you in the next week, in the next post. So until then, saints and ain'ts, I'll be seeing you. Bye.